There are no issues with that. Welcome, everybody. I will turn myself back on here. Really nice to see everyone here. I'm so excited. This started as we just had a wonderful couple of weeks in Egypt with Nasim Haramein, and there were 90 of us. And Nasim was kind enough to try to fit in a presentation because his physics has so much to do with fractal scaling laws, and my work has so much to do with fractals in the body. And so he was trying to fit it in, but we had so much going on. It was such an amazing trip. And so I told the Egypt crew that I would do an online presentation. And then I just said, well, I might as well send it out to everybody else. And now 2,500 people signed up for the call, which was unexpected and a quality problem to have. I haven't had the problem that only 1,000 people are allowed on Zoom. So I'm really honored that you're all here and excited that I think there's nothing more exciting. I was reflecting this morning on being able to share and discuss the things that inspire you so much, and that the vehicles that we use are the vehicles to share inspiration. And so I just love that we're all here in a think tank of some communal interest, and it's so wonderful to see you all coming in from all over the world. So I know people are just still going to be joining, but to honor those who have come now, I just want to jump in. First of all, to let you know, we have a couple of virtual assistants of mine. Kira Butterfield is here. I don't know if you want to just pop in. Can I even, I'll
Yep.
pin you for a second. There's Kira.
Hello, everyone. Great
Yeah.
to be here. Great to see so many people from all over the place.
So she will be, she and Wendy, I will just show you Wendy as well so that you know who you're dealing with. This is Wendy. She's one of our senior somatic stretch teachers, and she's here for some backup too. So they will be here in order to be able to moderate the chat. So I can just focus on speaking. Any questions that you have, you can just throw into the chat, and I'll be addressing questions at the end. And so even you might even want to just have like a pad of paper and a pen next to you, just jot down thoughts as they come along. You might find that I answer some things as we go through, and otherwise do drop them into the chat. Wendy and Kira are going to be kind of correlating the questions, and then we'll go through them. The presentation itself, well, I'm practicing slowing down. So I'm thinking it's going to be about just over an hour, hour and 10 or something like that. And then we'll have a lot of time for Q&A. And I just want it to be a lot of fun, hear your thoughts. I've been in this work for really my whole life, since the middle of the 90s, which I guess is not my whole life, but most of it. That's when it started. And I, you know, a lot of people, like even in the group in Egypt, some of them were really familiar with physics, and other people didn't know what a fractal was. So I'm going to kind of start from the beginning and go through all of that with you. And I'm excited to hear your questions. And really, really, I'm grateful for Nasim Haramein and the Resonant Science Foundation for allowing me to share this on such a big platform to reach so many of you. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm actually going to start with a video. Did I say everything I wanted to say? I didn't. I'm going to say some more because there's people coming on anyway. So the things that as I was saying, this began as a talk for the Egypt crew that we had. But before I went to Egypt, I actually had already organized a program that I've had for a couple of years on my website at geometryofhealing.com and on the Resonant Science Foundation, called Fractal Anatomy and the Geometry of Healing. That's one program with 2 levels. And because I'd bought a lot of programs in the last couple of years and didn't get through them, I thought it would be good to come on live with people and go through the program bit by bit. So I organized that before I went to Egypt, and it's starting next Friday. So it's kind of convenient that now there's this presentation. So regardless of whether you choose to join us on Friday for 4 Fridays, and I'll explain the details of that, and the girls will send out a link as well. Whether you join us to actually go through the whole program together, I really want to give you a lot of inspiration today about your own bodies and what fractals are and how this helps you. So we're going to look at various ways that we view the body, and from the east to west, and how they can actually agree with each other once we really look at fractals and what fractals are and what they have to do with the body. and what we're seeing already in medicine and what have you, and what that has to do with physics. And how geometry and fractals are really a key to understanding pattern, which is actually a very ancient concept, and therefore how it helps you. So the main way that it helps you is on a physical level. It really helps reduce your aches and pains in a very different way, because you're starting to look at causative factor. And I'm going to talk about all the different, I don't think there's any one theory, obviously, that has the monopoly over any kind of knowledge of things. But I do think that once we add geometry and the nervous system and neural frequencies to the conversation, we start to see how everything actually agrees with one another. And when that happens, we can actually understand where causative issues to physical aches and pains are. And so I want to also, hopefully in the Q&A, be able to address some specific issues that people have in order to make this a very kind of living experience for you. So obviously it creates more mobility and range of motion by understanding causative factors, and it prevents injury because you can really create a lot of flexibility through your body. So we'll talk about how that is, and the techniques that I use and that I was raised in to work with that as we go along. And I also, so I help people. I have a lineage you'll hear about called somatic stretch. I'm a lineage holder of that work in my family. And I always say that the body taught me what fractals are, and somatic stretch taught me how to use them. And so I teach people who have their own aches and pains how to actually unlock them better. And I also teach therapists who work on bodies, because I was trained in shiatsu and acupuncture in the mid 90s, and I've been in practice ever since. So I teach bodywork therapists how to, and anywhere from massage to chiropractic to craniosacral to acupuncturists, how to add another aspect of our anatomy into the toolbox in order to accentuate what their treatment results are. So I am practicing speaking slowly today, and I get carried away with myself. So if I end up speeding up a lot, please do drop into the chat to Wendy or Kira, and they will give me a little like heads up to tell me to just slow the hell down. So I'd like to start this afternoon, wherever you're hearing this from, perhaps on video. Just drop into your body. I invite you to close your eyes. And we're going to do a little experiment of just first dropping into your breath and relaxing your whole body. And so the usual thing of just dropping the muscles that you see in your body that you're holding on to. Many of them you're not even aware you're holding. So you're just going to scan through your body, do that first initial relaxation response, softening the throat, relaxing the chest, dropping the shoulders, the diaphragm, the belly, the arms. Just go through your whole body. And we're just going to take a moment of silence to kind of drop in and really sort of feel the resonance in our group today as you sink into that inner wisdom of your own body. And I'd like you to consider, as you are looking within, how do you relate to yourself? What do you see when you look inside? What kind of relationship and imagery or ideas or concepts do you have about your body? And just take some time to consider them before we go through the material today. And where are the areas inside your body that you have a relationship to, or does it all just look like darkness? Just take some time to explore. And keep dropping tension through your body. Noticing whatever comes up. in the emotional, physical, mental body. And we don't take a lot of time to consider how we actually consider ourselves. And so today, I want to hopefully highlight a little bit of a light beam inside of some information so that by the end of today, when you look inside, perhaps that view has changed and given you some perspectives of how to connect even more deeply with yourself, how to empower and take care of yourself all the more through this connection with your inner body and your inner wisdom. And this happens through the language of sensation. So just sense everything you can for this last little bit. Great. And when you're ready, just slowly open your eyes and come to center. For those of you just joining, again, we are going to be going through a presentation and then taking some questions at the end. Please drop your questions into the chat, and Wendy and or Kira will be available. If you have any issues, you can drop those into the chat. Any questions, drop those in there. They will they'll share them later on as we catch in. So I'm going to start today with a short video. Maybe if some of you are familiar with my work, you will have seen this before. So here's just a little visual journey into the body. Can you see this? Yep. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to be going through that material, what that means and why. And some of it looks kind of esoteric, but I really want to express that this was a very powerful sensory exploration for me. In my mid-20s, when I was just finishing 2 years full-time at Shiatsu and Eastern Diagnostics and about to go on to acupuncture studies, I had a very powerful experience of a lot of energy ripping up my spine, basically, and throwing me very off course for a month. But that experience was very life-altering, to make a longer story short. And it left me really wanting to understand the sensory experiences I began to have after that. And I began to feel meridians instead of just touching, instead of just studying them. And I come from a family of people who've always worked with the body. So I think something in that was very activated. And what I'm going to show you and how I learned about the geometry of the body is through a sheerly sensory experience. And then I found a lot of theory to back it up over the years. So this has been a lifetime of work for me to not only sense and make comparisons between things and draw things together, but also be able to understand it enough to be able to share it in that kind of way. So I'm going to kind of jump to the end and just tell you that the main thing that's different about how I view the body now in relation to what is probably contemporary understanding is that your whole body is fabric. So when we think about neck pain or shoulder pain or wrist pain or ankle pain or back pain or foot pain or whatever kind of toe pain, whatever's going on in the body, we think that we're thinking holistically. But in fact, we've been so linearly trained that we don't recognize just how much the body is fabric. So any pull on the fabric is going to affect every other part of the body. And so one part of your body is very connected to another. And by the time we go through the presentation and I share some ideas, I think that will become even clearer what I mean by that. And one thing is that the Chinese say when we're studying acupuncture, there are these phrases from the Nanjing, these old ancient scripts that you learn and then regurgitate on exams. And one of them is the 10,000 diseases arise from the hara. Now the hara are your organs. And to make a longer story short, and the fact that they say the 10,000 diseases arise from the hara has been one phrase that has stuck with me over the last 30 years of working with bodies, because I'm seeing that more and more. The more I put my hands on a body and work on them, the more that I work on my own body, everything comes from the interior. The fabric pull begins with your mind. Your mind is the biggest muscle, and it's always leading us. We're thinking about going here, and the whole body pulls that way. And we're really nothing but a physiological expression of a psychological state of mind. And our body is responding to all of it. So when a client walks in and I see them, and you do this yourself, you can tell a lot about a person by how they're holding themselves. And that tells you a lot about their mind and their being and who they are, because we are mirroring from mind to body. There is no separation really between the two. So this idea of fabric pull beginning with the mind having an idea and a thought, it contracts and holds your breath and pulls on the finest little areas. There's a lot of talk of fascia and different things. So just consider the soft tissues of the body, this river inside your body that in little soft pulls, just pulls in all directions from the inside. And then as it's pulling down, it's actually pulling on different parts of the body. And so we have these different areas we call our neck and our shoulders and our wrists and our elbows. But I want you to start thinking about the internal part of the body being where the pulls begin. And we go over that a lot I teach weekly. I just taught this morning, twice a week, our somatic stretch classes I teach here online. And we go through a lot of that, really allowing you to really understand how to drop into your body and feel how much you're holding and how much you can actually relate to the interior in order to release the exterior. And another way to think about it is that you would never look at a sewage system that has a bunch of pipes and different angles and intersections where gunk can really kind of get bunged up in there. And then you'd have other pipes and other areas where things get caught. Let's say there's one major area where there's a bunch of gunk, and so it's really slowed everything down. And you've got other little areas that then start to pool and cause issues. You can remove the little pooling areas, but until you really understand the causative level of removing what's there to let everything flow through, these little areas are still getting very, very stuck, but they're not going to release all of it. So why do we think about our bodies differently? We're just fluid river flowing, moving through, and our mind catches, holds breath, and locks in areas that create blood to pool and nutrients to get locked in and lactic acid to build up and what have you. So I want to bring you into the idea of core energy of your body. As we're going through these visuals and these images, there's a lot of theory behind them. And again, if you're interested, you can dive into that with us next week in the Fractal Anatomy program. But regardless, I want you to start to really feel what's going on inside. So we'll go through the theory first, and then we'll kind of apply it to the body. And you can also bring up specific issues, and I'll do my best to help you relate exactly to what we're talking about. So I began to see planes of energy moving through the body. And I began to understand eventually that what I was witnessing really was neural impulses in the body. And then I began to realize there was something else even that I was seeing. And I'll just let that unveil itself as we go through the program. So I am going to share my screen and go into my presentation, which is not that. It's right here. Okay. I don't know if I can can you see the admit thing, Kira, on my screen when I do that? Or is it clear and you can just see my...
I think it's clear. Yeah, no, can't see it.
Okay, good. Great. So you can see this electromagnetic spectrum picture though, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm just trying to figure out how to get, my cursor isn't showing up, and I want to actually get the picture on the right not showing like that. I don't know if you can do that. Let me know if you can. So this is the electromagnetic spectrum. And these are all of the different rays that we know exist in the world. Please make sure that you have muted yourself, because it helps with the recording and the presentation, and it also really distracts me and I get thrown off really easily. Thank you so much. So this is the electromagnetic spectrum, everything, the cosmic rays, gamma rays, the UV rays, X-rays, everything that we use to run our technology today, we put in this nice little neat linear line. And we, of course, this is not how it functions. I mean, consider even just what's in the room that you're sitting in. There are all of these different rays, but we put them in a nice little line. And we know that the electromagnetic spectrum is infinite, but we haven't found all of it yet. We just know theoretically it is infinite. And then this little slice in the middle is how we can see that visible spectrum. So it's like this little space of vision in this sea of invisibles. And so there's a lot of invisible around us. And eventually we're really going to get to a point very soon, particularly when the unified field theory is discovered, where this is going to span out even more. When it starts to do that, it's going to be impossible not to see the bioenergetic nature of the body in it. I can't imagine that we can run into any more aspects of these different kinds of rays in the body in the world without noticing them in the body. So we're kind of exploring what could possibly be the groundwork available to the bioelectrical energy of the body, and how can the East and West and the different kinds of ways of working with the body agree with that. So, oh, it's not letting me. Why can't I, oh, there we go. Okay, that was strange. Can you see everything still?
No, you're not sharing your screen anymore.
Okay, this is really weird. I don't know what's going on. Sorry, because what was happening was, for some reason, I couldn't actually move it forward. Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can hear the little air sound. No,
You can't.
no, you're not sharing.
So when I go to here, first of all, let me just turn that down for a second. When I go to here and I go to play, you can see that, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, great. Now it's working. I don't know why it wasn't. So just to do a little background on me, I come from a family of people who've always worked in the healing arts in one way or another. My mother in the middle there was a very well-known dancer in Canada, and she went on to create something called somatic stretch. My grandfather, who's the one hanging out in the tree there, which is kind of funny because the family's from Finland. And I don't know, I just don't consider the Finns sometimes to be the lightest of people. It's a part of my heritage I love very dearly, but I just love this picture of my grandfather because he's totally hamming it up. But the very physical person. And so there's this whole lineage. My grandfather used to just stretch for a living. I mean, for himself, just every day. I remember growing up and watching him stretch naked in the sun in the morning with his weird concoctions he'd gone out and herbs and different things that he would be sipping in the morning, and just stretching his brown body on the veranda every day. And my mother, in growing up in the company, he was a masseur from Finland. And so he worked on my mother. And I grew up around all of this kind of bodywork related kind of thing. And I am now a lineage holder of this type of work called somatic stretch, which I do find to be a really incredible way of getting in touch with your body and the neural circuitry, and help to understand even more so what fractals are and how they work in your body. Now, I bring up my heritage because this is a really interesting thing. This is a woman named Aija Koski from Finland, and she is somebody who creates himmeli, these are called, and these are geometric designs that hang over the tables of Finnish people, and I'm sure some other people too, particularly at Christmas time, interestingly. But these geometries, nobody really knows where they come from. But I just love the fact that as I was sensing over the years planes of energy moving through the body, and I slowly came across geometry, I was really shocked and really upset, actually, that I ran into geometry, because I didn't know anything about it. And I failed math in high school, and I despised math and anything having to do with it. And I really thought that I'd spent 15 years trying to understand something that was going on in my body and in the bodies of clients, and that I was obsessed about, only to run into the thing that I completely suck at the most. So I was really frustrated. And then as Providence would have it, I started running into people that not only knew about geometry, but were really the best in geometry, like Jonathan Quinton and eventually Nasim Haramein and Marshall Lefferts, and different people that really helped me understand that there was a language called geometry that allowed me to understand even more and be able to express what it was that I was seeing in the body. So somebody sent me a picture of Aija one day from Finland and said, look what your ancestors have always been doing. And I just thought that was really interesting, because of course, if we look at something like the isotropic vector matrix and these different kind of geometries that are around, that was coined by Buckminster Fuller originally. And what we're looking at in physics, they are the exact same shapes as these himmeli that the Finns and others have been making for centuries. Now, what we're going to cover today is the fact that there is a unified field theory in physics. And that unified field theory is the understanding of, that's something that Einstein coined. And it was trying to understand how all the big pieces move. And so the theory of relativity is how all the, the big things, the planets, space, time, what have you. And then the quantum world is all of the very, very little itty bitty bitty bits. And it's kind of like trying to make a connection between the atoms of the fibers of your sweater and the pattern on your sweater. There has to be a line between them that connects them all, or else there would be no cohesion. So the unified field theory in physics is still the holy grail of what people are searching for in physics. And Nasim gave us a fantastic view into his latest paper, which if you're following Nasim's work, you'll find really fascinating. So the unified field theory in physics is everybody's holy grail. When we discover how the big things fit with the little things, it's really going to change the whole phase of our world drastically. And it's going to make the Industrial Revolution look like a little hiccup. So imagine having anti-gravity available to us, not having to take fossil fuels from the earth in order to be able to use energy. I mean, it really changes the entire structure of how we're running things on the planet. And that's the whole field of where we're moving into. So I have also coined what I would call the unified field in medicine. And that is the fact that from the East and the West, there is not a cohesion. And until we really understand what thousands of years of Eastern philosophies have come up with in relation to the last couple of hundred years of our Western science, we really can't see the thread of continuity, and there has to be a connection between the two. And what I feel is that fractals, which are what really explain a lot of the unification in physics, certainly as Nasim expresses them, is also what the body showed me. And I have to say that I didn't originally have any idea what the word fractal was. Fractals to me were just something that I saw one day in the body. And then the next day, a magazine fell open in my lap that showed me, it was a whole article on fractals. And I was like, oh, that's the word to describe what it is that I see in the body. And we're going to talk about what that means. But now, and then if you Googled fractals online, you wouldn't be able to find anything. Now, when you Google it, it's not only coming up in medical literature, which I knew was going to happen eventually, and we will talk about that. It also, there's also eyeshadow that's fractal, and chocolate that's fractal, and cars that are fractal. And it's like a whole new branding, cool way to sell your gear that has absolutely nothing to do with fractals whatsoever. So now in the last decade, it's become just a really super cool word at the same time. This is a very common picture of a fractal. I should have, in fact, put the video in of this where you can see it moving, but this is Benoit Mandelbrot. He was a self-taught mathematician at IBM who first discovered the mathematical array of fractals. And this is what it looks like. And I'm really surprised I didn't think to put the video in, because it just takes you in further and further and further and further, but the same pattern keeps coming up. So a fractal is a pattern that repeats itself at different scales. And you can think of Russian dolls that fit into each other. It's the same picture, it's the same doll, but it's smaller and smaller, and they all fit into each other. Here's another idea. Oh, it's freezing again. Why is it doing this? Okay. Wow.
I think if you clicked out of it, you just need to make sure that you've.
I can't click. That's the thing. It's stopping me from clicking. Uh-oh. I can't seem to do anything. Wow. Huh. Here we go. Oh, it's making me do it this way now. That's so strange. Anyway, as long as it's working. So here's the idea of a fractal too. You can see how a hurricane moves. And this is actually showing the golden mean in cosmological geometry or universal geometry, because we don't really like using the word sacred geometry because it throws people off and sounds a bit too esoteric when it's really quite scientific. And you can see the nature of the nautilus shell, and you can also see the same golden spiral mean around the eye, the ear, for instance. Now, acupuncturists have an entire way of working with the entire body by using the ear, and it looks like an embryo, the ear, and also looks very much like your kidneys. And in fact, there's a whole understanding of working with auricular acupuncture in order to be able to affect what's going on in the body. Now, this is, there we go. Okay, now I can stop sharing. I'm going to just show you a little video about fractals that I put into my fractal anatomy program, because I think it's really helpful. Even if you're familiar with fractals, I don't think it hurts to go through it again. And a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of it. So I'm just going to share that. I'm sorry for the technological stuff. I mean, I don't know why it's freezing sometimes on me, but let's just learn a little bit about fractals. Here, just let me know if this is a go.
Got it.
There is a
Yeah.
haunting, if deceptive, modernity in the notion, so often celebrated by Baroque poets and thinkers, that arteries and the branches of trees, the dancing motion of the microcosm, and the solemn measures of the spheres, the markings on the back of the tortoise, and the veined patterns on rocks, are all ciphers. Fractals are patterns that repeat themselves at different scales, like Russian dolls that fit into one another, or like people coming out of people, or how lungs, rivers, and trees all have the same pattern but manifest so differently. Fractals are a field of mathematics that was more fully formulated by Benoit Mandelbrot, a self-taught visionary mathematician who was largely responsible for developing the field of fractal geometry in the 1970s, and who also gave this area of study the name fractal after the Latin fractus, meaning broken or irregular. Math is a language that uses numbers that create shapes, and this fractal image was created by Mandelbrot, who further illustrated how fractals can occur not only in mathematics, but throughout all of nature. It is the ability for something to scale from the very small to the very large by using a common pattern that makes it fractal. A fractal is not just a pattern repeating itself, it is a pattern that gets larger and smaller and yet looks the same, like Alice down the looking glass. It's just these kinds of patterns that Eastern medical systems are based on. Thousands of years of medical insights were crafted by closely watching and understanding the patterns of the natural world and applying those same patterns to the human body and environment to prevent illness or heal the sick. The Chinese referred to this phenomenon of finding patterns within patterns, Li, and while translations of that word are numerous, as a concept it embodies both our notions of pattern as well as principle, form as well as thought. In the book Science and Civilization in China, Joseph Needham writes, Li reflect the order and patterns in nature, but it is not pattern thought of as something dead like a mosaic. It is dynamic pattern, as embodied in all things living and in human relationships and in the highest human values. Patterns such as these tend to be fairly simple, and yet they contain a high degree of information. There are many kinds of patterns in nature, such as branching patterns, that are found not only in lungs, trees, and rivers or lightning, but in the neurons of your brain, your gut, and in certain cells of your heart. Even how the heart beats is fractal, and doctors at Harvard have learned to look at the pattern of a heartbeat to avoid more invasive measures to test heart health. The more consistent the patterns of a heartbeat are, whether viewed on an ECG with close magnification or further away, the healthier the heart is. When the fractal nature starts to break down in the heartbeat, so does the heart. Tumors are becoming better understood and diagnosed earlier due to the fractal nature of their behavior, and our cell phone antennas conduct energy through a fractal structure that allows for a lot of activity to happen in a very small space. Any and all patterns offer a structure that provide easy and broad access to areas, whether they transit water, electrical impulses, oxygen, or nutrients. Removing the word lung or neuron or lightning leaves only the pattern of its expression behind. Patterns found in all of nature can offer us insight into new areas we don't yet understand by overlaying a pattern and finding similarities between structures or systems that formerly seem disconnected. As man is of nature, then watching nature gives us insight into the workings of man. Fractals are a vocabulary of shapes that offer an explanation to growth patterns. Having a template to growth patterns is helpful not only in how tumors grow or how mountains are formed, but to anything that grows, quickly or slowly, small or large, and from there we have unlocked a key where the ancient past meets the current physics. It's a vocabulary that is being used in medicine, the stock market, technology, and in your body. To think fractals only exist in mathematics is like saying numbers only exist in the world of, say, accounting, and not in the grocery store or in your bank account or on your telephone. Once you understood numbers, you found them everywhere, and the same goes for fractals. Scaling patterns are everywhere, and utilizing them has been a way of unlocking the mysteries of our world and our bodies for millennia. Fractal is our new word for pattern thinking, or Li, and when we lay the umbrella of geometry over an expression of energy flow in the body, we can find a language between East and West, and watch the face of medicine evolve even further as we learn more about our own innate ability to heal.
There we go. I have to keep changing around on how I'm starting and stopping. So I'm going to share again my presentation. Where are we here? Down here. So again, you can see this comment that was made in the film that doctors at Harvard are actually understanding the fractal nature of your heartbeat. So I asked my doctor, do you guys know how to read the heart like that? And he didn't know what I was talking about. So apparently it hasn't trickled down to our waiting rooms yet. But when you pull in closer and closer on the EKG and you can actually see the same pattern, you know that the heart is still healthy because it's upholding that fractal iteration. And again, it's not letting me. Why is it doing this? I have to keep stopping. Oh, here we go. Now it's making me do this. Okay, I'm having, sorry. I've never had a problem with this before. Of course it would happen now. But so here's another one. This is Wilder Penfield. He was a Canadian, what was he, a neuroscientist of some sort? And he was going in and tracking the brain in order to find out sensory reactions between the brain and different parts of the body. And what he discovered is that there is a rather deformed looking person, but a person within the brain that you can actually track. And in fact, there are two. I believe one's for the sympathetic nervous system and the other one is for the parasympathetic nervous system. So we're beginning.
Are we seeing something here?
Sorry?
Are we meant to be seeing something here? Your screen isn't
I
actually.
don't know why this isn't working. You can see this now, yeah, or no?
No.
So yeah, thank you. This is why
No worries.
this is why you guys are there. Let's try it again.
As Shelby said, it might be an unhealthy fractal pattern in your laptop.
Yes, I think that's it. So were you seeing me talking? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you see the picture though, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the Wilder Penfield thing. This is where you can actually see that there are ways to map out the brain in order to understand that there are a whole body inside your brain that is responding and reacting to different parts of the body, one for the sympathetic nervous system, one for the parasympathetic nervous system. So we're beginning to see more and more that there are aspects of the body mirroring whole parts of the body. And also, if you Google fractal now online, you will see that the hypothalamus, which is inside your brain, and the hippocampus as well inside your brain, that all of those are relating to the entire body. And there are whole medical papers now that are discussing the fractal nature of our biology. In an Eastern point of view, you see also that there are, I'm just going to go back and forth a little bit because it's really discombobulating. From an Eastern point of view as well, we've known for a lot of years, like your hand or your eye or your foot or your ear maps your whole body. And so we're seeing from the East and from the West that there are these correlations that parts of your body are mapping your whole body out. And it would stand to reason much more so that if one part of your body is mapping your whole body out, then all parts of your body would map your whole body out. It wouldn't just be a few different parts that would be mapping all of it, but then other parts wouldn't. So we're beginning to really understand this nature of one part of the body representing the whole part of the body. And so again, that's a fractal iteration. We're looking at how basically you can see your entire organ structure in your foot or in your ear or in your eye or what have you. And even within relationships, it falls into relational patternings. People are talking about that now within sacred geometry and how it has to do with our relationships. So the way I like to describe that is pattern helps us really understand how to unlock issues that otherwise, or theories, or analyze things that couldn't be analyzed before. So for instance, let's say you date the same type of person over and over and over again, and the story is the same. I met so-and-so, they were a jerk, this happened, I got ripped up, whatever happens. And then the next person, and it's always the same story, but the people are different. And the dynamic is always the same, but the stories are changing person to person, because there's no one person that's the same. And until we psychologically understand that there's an underlying pattern to the behavior that's inciting this response, you can't actually change it. So we use the term fractal, but pattern thinking is actually, this idea of Lie has been around for thousands of years. And Benoit Mandelbrot discovered it in math, and that really started looking into a whole technological side of things. But we can now see that that pattern relates throughout the universe, throughout the cosmos. When Nasim does his physics, he's talking about fractal scaling laws that really explain a lot. So it's like a new concept from the past that's really coming forward more. And I think that's why a lot of people are getting turned on to a lot of what's going on in geometry. And I will pause here to say that I think the reason that a lot of people enjoy geometry, particularly when it morphs and moves, is because it's one thing that I say, it's up on the screen here somewhere. Geometry is not the source of energy, but it's an agent for the human mind to witness the invisible in action. So the understanding that we have a nervous system, which is neural impulses that function in frequency, and frequency is geometric in nature. When you're watching geometry and looking at it, it's like your nervous system watching itself watch itself. And so a lot of you who are interested in this kind of field know that you're being drawn to geometry, that you go into a trance state when you watch it, that there's something in there. And it's almost like a little kid seeing another little kid and realizing there's a connection there. It's like our brains and our neural circuitry are relating to the very same pattern that it consists of. Let's see if my program will work again, so that we can move on. When I look at the body, this is the best 2D explanation that I can come up with to share what I see when I look at a body. There's a lot of information on the neural frequencies of the body. And so a lot of the work that I do too, which I thought was far too woo-woo, but I've been doing for about 15 years now, is reading the body from a distance, because you are able, when you're really understanding and can connect to the sensory system of the body and the frequencies of it, it's like tape cassette recorders, and there's a lot of information on it. And so being able to actually see the emotions in the mind and the body as it blends together gives me images of the person involved, and that helps create a dialogue of moving along through a person's story that I wouldn't have known before with that person, and it creates a lot of clarity. I don't like calling it medical intuition. Sometimes a lot of physical stuff does come up, but a lot of it is really emotionally based, because that is where the organs are functioning from as well. Okay, computer's still doing weird things. Let's try again. Wow. It's just locking me out. Oh, look at, I can do that. That was new. So this is the quote from before that came through once. Geometry is not the source of energy. It's an agent for the human mind to witness the invisible in action. So people always ask, what is the point of geometry? And we're wearing it on our t-shirts and stuff now, but what does it mean? And it's actually mapping out the world around you. So an analogy that I commonly use is that we're like fish swimming in water. And if you swam up to a fish and you showed them oxygen and hydrogen, it would be in a very geometric structure, because all atomic structure is geometric. And if you held that up in front of a fish and said, this is what you're made of and what you're swimming in, it would take a real leap in consciousness for that fish to understand the idea that that was literally the invisible water that it was swimming in and that it was made of. And so geometry is something that I think from a evolutionary point of view is really kicking in to our psyches, and we're recognizing and seeing pattern anew and seeing that kind of geometric relationship, just like a fish all of a sudden seeing hydrogen and water everywhere they looked. So the area that we're looking into between Western physiology, we have things like muscles and nerves and dermatomes, which are areas on your skin that allow you to feel. And then in Eastern medical sciences, we have a whole bunch of different ways of viewing the body, like meridians and chakras, concepts around Kundalini, Taoist belts of tension, Dantian and Ayurvedic nadis. Now, you may or may not be familiar with these systems, but suffice it to say they've been around for thousands of years. And we do need to be able to have a relationship between the two and understand what they were talking about in the past in relation to what we're finding in our medicine. And that is really, we're so on the cusp of that. It's very exciting. These, for instance, are dermatomes on your body. This is just one map of how you feel. And the first thing a doctor will tell you is that we cannot understand the whole nervous system and how it works. If you dissected the entire body, but the nervous system, it looks like a body standing in front of you, as with the vascular system. I don't know if you've ever seen that, that the German guy who does the Body Worlds exhibit, and he has dissected bodies in this way. It's remarkable to see just how finely packed the human body is, all bodies would be, in order to have a full nervous system standing in front of you, or a full vascular system, or a full lymphatic system, and they're all packed in together in this same space called you. And so this map, for instance, of dermatomes is just a way to understand how you're feeling on your skin. And it's just one of many maps, and with an understanding that we don't have it all worked out. I'm going to whip through some ideas and pictures of what different systems look like. And this is a quick way to go through it, but I want you to be able to get an idea. You'll see these white lines running through, calling diaphragm, oral, throat, different things. This is Wilhelm Reich's work of understanding that there are muscular contractions that he called armoring around all parts of the body. And it's true that we're kind of very much like worms. It's not a very nice analogy, but it's true that we have horizontal and vertical striations through our body. That's how peristalsis works. It's how we swallow, different things of that nature. So we have muscular kind of rings around the body. And he focused on those a lot when dealing, he was a contemporary of Freud's, and he was dealing with a lot of extreme neurosis in his patients. And he was the first to really put his hands on a body instead of just talking from a distance. And he got a lot of flack for that. It's a long story short, but he really is the pioneer and the father of psychodynamic body work and understanding where the mind and the body meet. These three lines in the middle are Chinese medicine called the Sanjiao. It's a triple heater. It's a meridian system understanding. So while we're not going to go into all the details of them, I just want to give you an idea of what aspects are in the East and the West that kind of come together. So you can see how if you took that Sanjiao and you went right down to the very finest point of where contraction would be, it would run through the body. And then we see the chakra system, which is really the first system from the East to come into the West so much. There's a lot to say about the chakra system. I go into it a lot in my program in a very different way from usual. There are actually not 7 chakras in the Sanskrit text, which doesn't mean that it's wrong, but there are so many chakras in your body, and a chakra can be very likened to a singularity in physics. That's the short version of that story. But for now, let's just look at the 7 system, because that's what we're familiar with. Then there are 3 vertical lines that run through the body. This shows up in Chinese medicine in meridian theory, but it also shows up in Kundalini theory from the East. So you're looking at 3 vertical lines called Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna that run through the body. So there are a bunch of different philosophies and medical understandings in the East that correlate. And so we're just running through them really quickly. So that would be, if you're looking at the body, I want to encourage you to think planes of energy moving through, not just lines on the body. The same thing with the chakras, being able to see that the chakras are actually inside the body. They're not just little static dots on the back. So our linear mind likes to peg things a lot, and we have to try to bring it into a more living reality of the center of the body. There are also such things called the three dantian. And a lot of people will be familiar with the lower dantian, particularly if you've done any martial arts or what have you. The lower dantian is your center of gravity. It's there's some fascinating stuff to say in relation to acupuncture that I can't go into now, but that are really cool correlations. There's tons of correlations between the East and the West and acupuncture and what we're finding. There's one, another dantian in the middle of the heart and one in the middle of the head. And we'll see this in other ancient kinds of writing. Interesting, this comes from The Occult Anatomy of Man by Manly Palmer Hall, which is a fascinating book. So this is these are old texts and old images that are, again, showing the three centers, but I want you to also note that it's interesting that they've got this star tetrahedral sign under where the genitals are, where the life force energy is, because we're going to see that later. And again, Pythagoras, looking at the Pythagorean pentalpha, showing these three centers of the body. So again, we're just sharing a very brief overview of the correlations between different systems of thought, but how they actually all match up. And when you put them all together, they start to look like this. I always feel a little bit guilty just running through this so quickly because there's so much to say about each system, but it's really just a general idea, and this is where it's helpful to you on a daily basis, where you see those red points are next to what the 7 chakra system is. Consider those red points as well like chakras. Chakras are really just areas that I call intersection points of connection, where the neural system, I mean, we don't know where we come from, right? We're spinning on a rock in space and we showed up somehow, and we don't know how long we're here for. We don't know if it's going to hurt when we leave, and we don't know where we go. So there's clearly an energy source that's giving us energy and that we move back into. And of course, that basic law of physics, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes form. So these little red points, I want you to consider are where, let's look at the one next to the green heart chakra center. That's where your shoulder pain and your neck pain and your arm pain and your wrist pain come from. In the middle of your chest, where that green center is, and there are also points on the side. If you drilled a hole directly through that red point, it would go right to that nagging pain at the back of your shoulder blade, the inside of your shoulder blade. So again, going back to the idea that things are fabric, consider for a moment that you hold your breath on fine levels that you're not aware of. And it creates a kind of vortex pull in the middle of, let's just take this one red point to make a point. And it spirals in on itself. And like fabric, it starts to pull down, and it pulls down on the neck, that point. If you put your hand right on the top of your shoulder where it always kinds of hurts, put it there and rub until you find the part that's really sensitive. And then take a deep breath in. And then as you exhale, I want you to just think energy from your thumb deep, deep into the middle of your chest. So between your pectoral muscle in your chest and that nagging pain between your shoulder blade, I want you to think into the middle. And by thinking into the middle and making that connection between the surface and the core aspect of where there is a pull in the body, much more dramatic releases will happen. And that's really the purpose of understanding how there is a fractal nature to the body and how we can work to core to alleviate what we think are deep tensions when in fact we're thinking quite superficially in the body. Now everything's stuck again. There we go. Actually removed. There we go. So as we're just kind of taking down, as I was working on people over the years, I was seeing planes of energy, which we'll start to look at in a second, moving through the body. And it was giving me this shape. And the shape was starting to form, but they were intersection points within the body as well. And as I was going along, I wanted to kind of reach, and I could feel a core section to the body in the interior. And yet it was all just made of planes of energy, kind of like trying to get into the center of the sun when you're just seeing a bunch of beams everywhere. But eventually I saw this clearly enough to be able, and I wanted to just kind of reach in and grab it and pull it out of the body. And eventually I had that made because it was geometry that was forming. But that geometry is very 3D, and we're looking at it from a 2D perspective here. And you'll see that I eventually discovered that it started to get very esoteric and weird. And it started to look like the Kabbalah, which surprised me because I have no relationship to the Kabbalah. And bear with me for a moment. You can see here too that the Kabbalah is not in 2D. It's very much in 3D.
Damn it.
And you're able to see lines of energy that move through the body or through this shape. And you can see perspective here. You can see that the angles are drawing to show you perspective and depth, and that it's not just a 2D focus. So let's go back to looking. Just pretend that you're thinking sensory awareness in the body, that there are 3 lines of force moving through the body. And if you wanted to just denote where the lines were, you would just draw 3 dots on the top of the head to say there's a line here, a line here, and a line here. However, there's angles moving through the body. And so this triangular angle really is how I started to feel through the body. So I would touch a pectoral muscle, but there was an angle going right into a center core in the body. And the angle was very triangular, for lack of a better word, in nature. So there are angles moving through. And what it really looks like in the body is this sort of idea, if you take away all of the other planes that create this shape. And when you take that shape and you lift it up and look at it from a 3D perspective, you can lie the Kabbalah right over it, which I found to be a very interesting coincidence. When you look at the top of the head and you see these angles, it was also equally valid the other way around. So all I was doing was sensing angles and drawing them out. This was not in any way an exercise in geometry or an exercise in esotericism at all. Oh, where did the other part go? Oh, here we go. Quick segue. I was in Ireland going through the airport once upon a time, and I found this beautiful picture there. And you can see that there are, and this is just interesting coincidence, there are 3 lines through the body of the priest, and then there are 6 spirals on each side in the body, and the spiral nature of energy. And then at the top of his head, I don't know if you can see that, are 3 spirals that form a triangle. And I just had to stop and look at that for a while, because that's exactly what I was seeing in the body as I was forming all of this. When you look at it from each side, it creates this Star of David, this star tetrahedron, whatever you want to call it, that runs through the body. And what that shape started to look like was this. It's actually a double terminated crystalline structure. Now, I was just going through this, piecing things together. There's sensory experience, and then there was things that I was reading in books in order to piece everything together. And I found it really interesting that it's actually a double terminated crystalline structure. So when I said that it was neural impulses I was starting to really feel in the body because of heightened sensitivity, and that was really speaking to all systems of the body because they were relating to one another. All of these different Eastern systems were making sense together. And it is very quick to go through it all without all of the theory behind it. But again, if you want to dive in, we're doing that next week. This I love. So this is a guy called Clay Taylor who takes photographs of light. And this is a sphere and a photograph of light moving through the sphere. And I want you to just take a look at the angles, because I began to see that it wasn't just neural impulses I was reading, it was light refraction in the body, or light in the body. And so when you lay it over, for instance, even just the initial meridian idea, you can see the 3 lines running through the middle, and then these angles coming off. And all of those angles are what, when I am working on a body and I touch a body, when I think into core, that's what makes the body jump and respond and release, and tension melts in a whole different way. than it normally would, just using my classical shiatsu, or when I was needling acupuncture. So here are some quotes about light. One of the essential stores of light and sources of biophoton emissions come from DNA. So do keep in mind that I've been raised in a very East Coast way with a very little woo-woo, and the idea of being able to prove a point that we're light bodies is just kind of like a cosmic joke. But I find it fascinating the more and more I get into this field, how much there is to share and correlate to actually show that we're made of light and neural frequency running on that. Lynn McTaggart from the great book, The Field, said, our brain primarily talks to itself and to the rest of the body, not with words or images or even bits of chemical impulses, but in the language of wave interference, the language of phase, amplitude, and frequency. We perceive an object by resonating with it. To know the world is literally to be on its wavelength. So let's just take a look for a moment at the idea of light moving through a center. And so to me, when I look at a body, it is like tissue paper. And the same energy that's on the inside is the same energy that's on the outside. And so let's say there's a plane of energy that's running right through the solar plexus in the middle. And those planes of energy keep going. And it keeps dividing and dividing. And if it kept going, it would just be a ball of light. But you do that with all of them, and all of a sudden you see this kind of neural frequency net around the body. And so when I'm working on a body, I become very sensory aware of that. It gives me a lot of information about my internal world, and it also allows me to be able to read bodies, as I mentioned before. And just like light, if you just kept on looking at it, it would just become a chakra of singularity through the body. This is the shape that ended up being able to grab and pull out of the body. This is the result of a lot of planes of energy moving through the body and finding certain intersection points that, when addressed in the body from the outside, so even if you're doing any kind of technique on a body or working with your own body, thinking more to the center, it does powerful things to unlock the body. But in doing so, it also creates a bridge between the left and right brain. And that's where a lot of creativity and intuition starts to flow. That shape, interestingly, can be seen in the vector equilibrium of Buckminster Fuller. Here you can see 3 of them actually, and they're just representing a plane of a hexagonal shape, and yet the exact same shape is in there, and it's very fractal in nature. So while I'm showing it to you from a vision of the torso, it goes to the very small to the very large, and it gives us a map work. So how this is practical for me, if you want to just work on your calf right now and just start pressing into your calf and feeling where you feel sensitivities in the area, imagine that your entire body is mapped out in your calf. And it doesn't matter if you know your meridian points, your acupuncture points, or different theories of different things. You are your own living laboratory. And so you can go in and you can just touch and feel certain areas. And the more your sensory system heightens, the more you're able to actually feel the connections. So when I'm working on a body, I go in and I work on the calf, and it pretty much gives me a map of what I'm going to find in the torso. And it usually is very much the case. And then at the end, you can go in and see how the calf changes. There's also points in the lower part of the leg that are so connected to the lower body that that they're contraindicated in pregnancy, because it can cause miscarriage if in first trimester particularly the child isn't really connected. So again, we're like fabric. We are a net of living tissue, breath, body, and energy. And we're really moving from seeing things on a linear perspective into a much more living, dynamic perspective that changes things. And in our physics, that's really starts to look like we're really connecting to energy as the phenomenon that we're swimming in. And so we are seeing all of these different kinds of images that are coming up. And just imagine these are all very much in your body, and that you can connect with areas that feel anything from lightness to heaviness, and that there are aspects of an entire matrix of connection inside your body that is very geometric in nature and is just running a lot of bioelectrical charge through the body. Now, what's interesting with Nasim Haramein's work, the reason I got interested in Nasim's work many years ago is because I was going through this, really weird phase of discovering this really weird work. And I was getting very, very confused because nobody was talking in my field about anything that I was noticing or sensing. And so this was a very, very long, good 15-year process before I really got to the point of understanding that I was even looking at geometry. And when I was very confused at the time, I would really, I would go in and look at this sort of geometry that was emerging. And somebody told me about Nasim's work. And he, years ago, he had, and he still has, a program that's like 8 hours long. And towards the end of that program, he starts showing cabalistic structure. And I stopped the video and just stared at the screen for a minute, because that was the first time I realized, if you can see that structure in the universe, that would make sense why I'm seeing it in the body. And what is this cabalistic structure? And they call it the blueprint of all creation. And they call it the tree of life. I mean, they say that it's just like, to me, it's just like holding the oxygen and hydrogen up to a fish and saying, this is what you're swimming in and this is what you're made of. This is called a tetrahelix of Nasim's. This is what he is using in creating his art crystals, where he has a lot of science behind being able to pull from the vacuum and actually hold charge. And he's done a huge number of scientific experiments with that. And we were working with him a lot when we were in Egypt. And this is a tetrahelix that he uses with the crystals inside of it to charge water. And this is one of the pictures that he was doing in experiments, where he's running water through it and doing different tests with plants. And the plants would end up growing significantly more robustly and larger than the other ones. So he had proof that he was indeed doing something that was pulling from the vacuum. And just for fun, I just put it next to the shape that I'm looking at. It follows a lot of the same ideas of clockwise and counterclockwise rotation. And that's what this shape that I call the cabalistic star actually represents. It's two cabalistic 3D structures put together in order to be able to show spin and counterspin in the spiral of the energy system of the body, and various points of access in between. That would be the best way I would know how to describe it. And so when we go into this shape and this general idea, this is really kind of what I'm seeing in looking in through the body, with a toroidal field that is around everything from an atom to the universe and beyond. And with that, I will stop sharing so that we can all take a breath. What time is it? Yep, 2:30, 3:30, an hour and 20 minutes. So that's the brunt of the idea, but I really want to be able to answer some questions. So thanks for listening. I have no idea what, oh yeah, Kira put down Nasim's black hole video there too. So I'd love to take some questions. I know it's a lot of information and I feel kind of guilty about it because there's so much information that's why I put together, 25 years of work in the Fractal Anatomy and Geometry of Healing program. So again, we are starting next Friday with 4 calls to go through it. It took me 25 years, but you can do it all in less than 7 hours. But we do go more in depth in it. And the first 2 calls are going to be hosted with guests like Jonathan Quinton and Marshall Lefferts to go through like what is pi and phi and Fibonacci and how do they fit together and who cares anyway, and what's it all about, and about the chakras and physics. And then level 2, we're going to be here on the floor, actually getting into your body and dynamically going through these Eastern energy systems to understand how they actually relate to your body while you're learning how to accentuate your sensory system and unlock your own aches and pains. Kira, do you want to maybe share a question and see if somebody wants to come on?
Sure. Do you want me to share the Google Doc with you or just choose something?
Just choose something. Yeah. And then whoever asks the question, you can ask them if they want to come on to just talk in person.
Sure. Well, I've been grouping questions, and a very common theme that's coming up is people sharing physical ailments that they've been working with and asking how fractal anatomy can help with these things. So we've got people asking about COVID, tinnitus, intracranial hypertension. I mean, there's probably a dozen different ailments that have been mentioned here. Hair loss. I mean, I don't know who to even choose. Or do you have like a blanket response to those types of questions?
Yeah. So basically the direction that medicine is going is like Star Trek, where you can just scan the body and you know what's going on with organ systems. That, when we understand that one part of the body is mirrored in all other parts of the body, helps us very much get to that level of technology in medicine. I'm not going to address COVID and hair loss, and tinnitus is actually one of the tinnitus, headaches, and skin problems. Even in Chinese medicine, they say they're some of the most difficult things to deal with because they're so systemic. But I will go over some basic things to be able to make the point. So a lot of people, for instance, let's just go back up into the shoulder, for instance. So how fractal anatomy helps you is the shape that I just gave you in the body is fractal in nature. You can see it in the torso. And actually, just before I forget to show you, this is the shape. I have it in my necklace as well. But what I loved about this, just as a quick segue, is that when I finally, I was just trying to find somebody who could make a geometry that I could just say, it feels like this, it feels like this, it feels like this, da 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 da, and they followed through. And this is the shape that came out of it, which is, I just showed you on the thing. But what was fascinating was when I could hold it, I then spun it. And it made this fantastic triad shape. And the triad is actually the easiest way to be able to understand the fractal nature of the body. So I love that it had this kind of triad nature to it. And so, for instance, upper, middle, lower pertains to upper, middle, lower, pertains to the upper, middle, lower of the lower part of your arm, or the upper, middle, lower of the lower part of the upper part of your arm. It can just keep going and going and going and going. And that's what I see as being the real nature of the body. So you could, in understanding, if we had the understanding to actually get this rabbit hole idea all the way down in through the body, you could heal your whole self by the tip of your finger if you knew how to relate to the energetic structure mirroring the whole rest of the body in your finger. So it's a philosophical way of looking at where we're going. The practical nature of it is just to really think about these 6 points in the body that I was showing. So this is like a card that I always use. We're just going to go back to these 6 red points in the body. Now let's just leave the middle points because they're a little bit harder to feel and relate to. But the lower part here is in the lower part of your abdomen. So when you get low back pain, and when you have tight hamstring muscles, for instance, tight hamstring muscles are coming from the middle of your gut that's actually winding in and pulling on things. You can say, oh, I'm so tight and different things, but the tension's actually coming from the internal part of the body. So when people come to me and they say, I've got low back pain, aside from the practicality of being able to elongate through the hamstrings and open up the body physically so that the structure of the low back can move better, the first thing I do is I go into their abdomen and I will find right in these lower parts of the abdomen here on each side of your torso. If I can just show you on me, right down in here, I will go into those areas and people will be like, oh, what is that? And I'll say, that's your back pain. So think about the fact that if you have women, when you have menstrual issues, your back hurts, or men and women, if you have a bowel issue, we had fun with that in Egypt, you can have low back pain from that as well. Different ways of actually relating that your guts have something to do with your back, but we don't really think about it that way. And so when we get into a structural hold, for instance, I mean, there are practical reasons for low back pain where we tilt our pelvis and the lower part of the back really has a lot of weight put on it. And there's a whole story in that. I'm also suggesting that what's actually happening is mind to breath to body, all the pulls start inside. So when I go in and I feel a contraction there, you can actually hold really gently and it starts to release. It's not just the psoas. So we take muscles like the psoas has been in vogue for about 15 years now. And before that, it was like the QL and everything was about the quadratus lumborum and the lower back. And then it was all about the piriformis. And then it's been all about the psoas. And we hold on to these specific muscles. And the fascial system is really important too, because it has its own geometry. But where does the geometry come from? It comes from the energy system of the body, from the neural frequencies, and dare I say it, light frequency in the body that's creating as a blueprint the geometric structure upon which fascia builds and the rest of the body. So that was a little bit of a digression, but if you're pressing down into the area, it can help really loosen and release. And the psoas is gripping in and around things, but we're looking at going into core. Same with the upper part of the body. This point here in the chest is actually where your shoulder pain is coming from, up in here, and pulling on the neck. There's this whole torque of tensegrity in the body that I also didn't go over in this presentation. Buckminster Fuller's idea of tensegrity. This is critical. Where's my little tensegrity ball? This is critical to understanding the whole idea of central points. So like even this little kid's toy is a little tensegrity unit, right? You have all these different points. Imagine that this is your shoulder and this is your neck. And this is the nagging pain between your shoulder blades. And this is something else. There's all these different areas, but you can feel a couple of them. If you're actually thinking that they're all coming from a fabric pull in the center, where is the most powerful part of this whole tensegrity unit that has a structure that can hold itself beautifully by how it's holding itself against everything else? But of course, the most important story of all of this is what's going on in the middle, because everything is going around the middle. And so we need to start thinking about the fact that we have guts inside our body that are being orchestrated by our mind pulling in all directions and grabbing our breath, and like murmuration of birds that move in different directions, the body is pulling. And if we can go to the center, so think about this point in here and going into the middle of what's underneath your finger. Even then my breath just like drops and releases because I'm thinking to where the core is, and then the body releases, the breath releases. When I'm working hands-on on a body, the whole body will twitch and release, different things of that nature. So in that way, the fractal nature of the body that I'm discussing isn't just your hand or your ear, but the idea that you can have a structure in the body that has particular intersection points, that this is a fractal image that we can see in the torso, we can see it in the calf, you can see it in different parts of the arm, different sorts of things like that. And it allows us to work with the concept of the Trinity, really, of upper, middle, lower, pertaining to the upper, middle, lower of your calf, pertaining to the upper, middle, lower of your arm, and what have you. So when you want to get rid of your neck and shoulder tension, you need to think into the center. And ultimately those centers that I'm talking about have a fractal relationship to the whole. I hope that makes more sense. Somebody just mentioned cosmometry. What is that toy? It's some kid's toy. It's a little kid's toy. This is what little kids play with now. Look where we're going. And okay, cosmometry, that's Marshall's book, fantastic book. Primer to understand so much of this. Yeah, he mentions me actually at the beginning, I think, or at the end, I'm not sure. And I'm familiar with Ibrahim Karim's work too. What was that guy I was watching on Gaia last night? He was amazing. Robert Gilbert. He's cool. He's really connected to Ibrahim's work as well. Kira, do you want to pull a question?
Hi, Meredith. I thought I'd do one for you.
Thank you, Wendy. That'd be great.
Good out. One of the questions was in regards to the relationship of this topic in cranial sacral therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so craniosacral therapy, we're looking at really kind of the hydraulic system in the cerebral spinal fluid, and how that pulse works in the whole rest of the body. So it's another way of understanding the anatomy that you're working with. So when you're holding somebody's head in your hands and you're doing, a cranial hold and you're watching energy flow, there is that pulse in and out that you're looking for in that way. And you might want to consider that you start seeing it pool in different areas too. I find that once this template is laid down, it gives you an idea of where core things can hold. So where does the pulse stick? And if you start to relate to the inner areas of the organ system, noticing if that changes your perspective and enhances your ability to actually get that craniosacral pulse to move more quickly. That's what I would say with that. As a short version, I do workshops where I'm working with people hands-on. I haven't done any for a while and I don't have any registered quite yet for that. I have one retreat in the south of France next June, but that's for people who want to work with their own bodies. When I'm working with therapists, we get into a room and we really start sharing how we're looking at bodies and how this can actually help aid and abet whatever you're doing. It's not to replace any therapy at all, but it's like an additional energy anatomy kind of overlay.
Okay. Another one came in from a brainstem injury earlier in life. I sometimes have nerve pain that radiates everywhere. Nerve pain and fractal anatomy relationship.
Well, what I'm talking about in the fractal nature of the body is neural impulses. So any injury on the body, if somebody's coming to me with an injury as a therapist, I'm looking at it. And so I'm going in, one thing that's helpful is because I'm understanding this template in the body, is I can feel where things are flowing well or not. So for instance, with MS in the body, I've so far been able to sense whether it's an extreme case or a little case. You know, I've had people say, you know, I've got MS, it's been diagnosed, but I'll go in and there's actually a lot of movement. You can feel the life force of the nervous system and where it's flowing and where it's not. To me, it's more neural related rather than, you know, Reiki related or craniosacral related pulses. It's mostly there's a particular feel to it. Somebody who has really advanced MS, for instance, it feels like wood. It's just not, there's no bounce, there's no give back. I'll touch a body and it's like, it just stops. It doesn't feed back to me. The more the body feeds back, the healthier it is. So if there's an injury in any part of the body and it's neurally related, I just have better tools to be able to go in and sense that. And also working with yourself, if you have a lot of pain manifestations in different areas, it does help to understand that even if you have pain in your wrist, what's coming from up in here that you can unlock to help actually get a radiation of response down into the wrist to unlock where aspects of the nerve of the brachial plexus are bundled, where it can be contracting and causing a reduction of blood flow and what have you. I hope that helps.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. There was another one, and this may be going over a point, but the idea of, for instance, if shoulder pain is originating the chest, would you focus on the healing needed in the emotional body? And I just thought interesting, you know, relative to the different bodies that people talk about, and the focus on the healing needed in the emotional body to help heal the chronic shoulder pain.
Yeah, absolutely. So many things just came to my mind to say about that. So which one do I want to choose? The entire body is running on your emotions, right? Like there's nothing, clothes were built to be warm. The house was built to be safe. The pit is dug for grief. You know, the hearth is built for nourishment. I mean, everything is run by our emotions. When we go into the body, you know, we talk about things like frozen shoulder. I remember sitting in a class I was teaching years ago. This just is one memory that comes to mind. And we were sitting in circle talking, and this one girl asked about a frozen shoulder. And when somebody asks me about what's going on in their body, I don't randomly read people, but if they start talking about what's going on in their body, I can't help but start to look in and see. And plus, we were in that type of class, so I got this image from her body of being really young and sitting at the dinner table and being yelled at and just having this like left shoulder pain, which is very connected to digestion as well. And so I said to her, you know, it feels to me like there's this story that goes on. And I explained that, and she burst into tears. Very composed person who just burst into tears, and it just came out of her shoulder. And that happens a lot in treatment too. You know, people will release an emotion without even realizing what it's connected to. So yes, the emotional body, the mind thinks, it holds the breath. It's an emotional response. It tracks in the body, and it tracks in particular laneways and intersection points, just like traffic. So you can't have one without the other, but you can address one to release the others. I can work physically on somebody to help release, but if their emotional body is not willing to let go of that thing, then there's no point. Like, for instance, I don't mean to do a broad sweeping generalization, but young men in their 20s, they have a lot of hold in their body because they're just learning how to like be in the world and be a man and stand up and do the things they have to. And if they've got a structural hold in their body, they don't have a good reason to let go of it yet. You know, that's a broad sweeping generalization way to put it.
One other thing that I think is quite topical relative to what's out there lately is about, trauma and the healing of trauma and traumatic energy. And can you speak about releasing traumatic energy that has been held over time relative to what you're talking about today?
Was that a question that came up, or is that one that you're just?
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. So trauma release is something that's really being discussed a lot now, a lot in the field. We're lucky that we have the leisure in our first world to be able to start considering things like releasing trauma instead of figuring out how to eat or run from a war, right? So it's a luxury to be able to consider how we can release trauma. Ultimately, it is at the bottom of a very dense pit of information, and there's no short answer to it because it's technique. Right. The question is, are you releasing? Does somebody, whoever asked that question, do you want to come on and talk to me about it?
That would be Marie Butcher.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Marie. I can. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. So I asked the question both about the shoulder pain and the trauma over time, because I feel they're related. Like we store these kind of wounds, psychic wounds, I guess, in the body.
Mhm.
And just like once we have the ability to kind of recognize that and then start to release them, I feel like, of course, it's a process. But I'm just thinking, further with the fractal, model, like how do we, like, maybe when it's like a really deep trauma, like how do we go deeper with the healing process, looking at the kind of like the overlays and the fractal pictures you provided?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So there are a lot of different reasons for trauma in the body, right? There's one great phrase, which is trauma passes down from one generation to another until someone is willing to feel it. One thing in our linear way of thinking and how we're raised is that, the issues that I have are just all about Meredith. And a lot of them are. I create my own reality. I do my own thing, but I also come from billions of other people. And so we inherit a lot more than we realize, including traumas. And epigenetics and Bruce Lipton's work has certainly brought a lot of light to that. So I met Bruce at one of his talks, and he had just said that shock, trauma, and addiction all go through 4 generations. So people that you didn't even know in your family, you have their trauma embedded. I've worked on people who have been who were in the Holocaust, and then worked on their children and grandchildren, and the same pattern was locked in the body. And how much of that was Holocaust and how much of that was other things, I don't know. But the point is that it was a very particular hold of trauma in the first person's body, and it's almost like entrained down through. So one thing that I think is important is to recognize that when we're working on pain, it's not just about what happened to us. There are patterns that are open and susceptible to pain manifestation based on what happened well before us. And so sometimes it's really helpful to be able to take our minds off of what did I do? This is about different things, and recognize I am looking at trauma as if it's another person that I am just observing and learning from, and not to take it so personally, almost would be a word for it, because, and I catch myself in it all the time. Sometimes it's good to like not dissociate myself from what something is, but recognize, wow, like the addictive propensities in my family are all over the place. I've had my own story of addictions throughout my life. There's still those poles that come in different ways. Am I going to feel like it's just all about me and I'm not doing well enough, or I did really well and I should be really proud of it, whatever it is. I'm also recognizing, wow, this is just addiction as a propensity and an energy that exists in me that I know existed well before me too. So that's one thing I wanted to address. As far as the fractal nature of things go, if you're working on yourself, I have found that regardless of all of the information that I just shared, if you pay attention to these 6 areas in the body, particularly the top 2 and the bottom 2, and learn how to feel them. And when you're working on your own body, which we do all the time in somatic stretch, you're really opening into different areas to release trauma. Now, your body is only going to release what you can take, right? Unless you're in a situation where you're with a therapist and they re-traumatize you somehow because they overstep the line, they push you too hard, or you push yourself too hard. But on the whole, as you're releasing things, you're able to actually drop and open more effectively and let the steam out, so to speak. We're trying to find ways to let the steam out. Now, Wilhelm Reich, there's a big discussion. I gave a talk at their conference this past summer. And there was a lot of discussion because the Reichian therapists are all like medical doctors, different people that own schools within that. They're very aware of, the Reichian principles of how to unlock tension in the body. Reichian is different from Reiki. Reiki is a energy technique. Wilhelm Reich was a contemporary of Freud's. And Reich would never unlock the pelvis until the very, very end because there was so much loaded in the pelvis. And we had a big discussion about how everybody works differently therapeutically and what would be beneficial. I've also done a lot of work in the sacred sexuality realm where they will go right into the pelvis and work that way. And I've seen a lot of problems happen because of that. And one thing I was doing in some classes that I was invited to teach and also was to recognize easier ways to get in from the outside in. And it doesn't mean that it's traumatizing just to do that, to work with the pelvis. And Reich was working with highly neurotic people, and that's different. But there are ways to work with yourself to let the steam out more easily by understanding intersection points where true causative pull is coming from. And then as far as if one is a therapist, letting trauma out in a client would be based on being able to read the body better because you really understand your Eastern and Western connection to the nervous system. And you're aware of what the body can take and work with it really gently to be able to read the signs of how much go and how much stop are there. But the more you work, if I'm holding an arm and I'm just thinking about the arm, I'm not going to get as much release as if I think into the center and I let it pull from there and then it releases. So the fractal nature is something that's always going to be in our world and in our technology in relation to the body. Just consider these 6 points and particularly the top and the lower 2, whether you're working on yourself or other people, and it will accentuate release in your body while your body is also guarding you from overstimulation and too much trauma release at once because your body has more wisdom than we do. Does that help, Maria?
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. And just one final remark is I'm really thinking about grief of a friend who's just lost their child, and just like how there's so much trauma throughout the body, and just like ways to kind of begin to I'll find new modalities to kind of release that like really raw kind of grief and trauma.
Are you a therapist, or are you just saying you're trying to find that person a therapist?
I'm trying to find for my friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that for you. I mean, it really would depend where you live and what you're looking for, but I would just encourage the person, whatever they're open to, asking them what they're open to, and going to good people. Just ask the people who they are and how they work, and you'll get a sense of them. And I think sometimes it's just really good to just try different people until that person finds the resonance that's going to work best for them.
Thank you.
And also just grief, meet the person in the emotion of just being able to hold it, just sitting in front of them and just being able to hold it.
Yeah, witnessing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Meredith, one logistical question. Barb Addison was asking about the upcoming immersion calls and what the point of them is. Is it to understand fractals? Is it learning the healing method? You know,
Yeah.
what people get in addition to what we've talked about today?
Okay, thanks. I'm going to share my screen right now, and I'm just going to show you, I'm going to show you the program so that you know what it is. So this is my website. If you go down, first of all, this is if you want to join my newsletter about sacred geometry kinds of things. There's this one here, and then this one is about somatic stretch and what we do there. Fractal Anatomy and the Geometry of Healing program has a lot of information on it. So I would suggest that you go to this page and you take a really good look at all there is to explain about what this program covers, why fractals matter. I hope you got a sense of why fractals matter for me today. And you're going into, there's so much in very detail. If you scroll all the way down, you're going to get to like everything that's in level 1 and level 2 down to the minute. This video is 9 minutes. This written thing has 912 words. This has 2000 words. And then I always have an audio where I just story tell. So like the electromagnetic spectrum can sound really boring, but I story tell you something about Michael Faraday. So you can just kind of stop staring at your computer and just listen to a story and going through it bit by bit. And there's all of that on level 1 and level 2. Now the immersion calls, if you go to here, it says new immersion calls and pricing, because I've given discounts and bonuses for the immersion. Some people have already bought the program and not necessarily gone through it, or gone through it and want to go through it again, or they haven't bought the program yet and have been thinking about it, or they just bought level 1 and haven't gone into level 2. You need to have both levels to join the immersion calls. The purpose of the immersion calls is for us to be able to actually go through the program together. So I also have guests within this, and it started because I'm also doing calls twice. So once to the time zones over on this hemisphere, and then also to Australia, New Zealand time zone areas, because they always get left out. So it allows us to be able to go through level 1 and level 2. I'm going to have Jonathan Quinton and Marshall Lefferts, who are brilliant, join as guests for the 2 level 1 calls. And then there's 2 level 2 calls where we're going to actually get more into the body. So if you go through the whole first page that I showed you, it will explain everything that we're covering. And then this is just 4 calls that allow you to be able to join live, where you can ask me questions. I really encourage people to either, if they have the program, to get the program and be able to do the certain number of modules before we're on together. So we're really going to go through it together. I bought a lot of programs myself in 2 years. I never went through them. This is my attempt to be able to bring people through the program who want to do it. So there's a discount of $50 plus bonuses. You get the free immersion classes and what have you. If you haven't bought the program and you buy level 1 and 2, if you already own it, it's just $97 for those 4 calls. They're 2 hours each. And then if you've already just bought level 1, but you want to upgrade to level 2, then you get that and the immersion calls in relation to that. So I hope that helps answer some questions. And Kira and Wendy will put links out so that you can check those out if you want to join us next week. So it'll be Friday for 4 Fridays in a row to actually go through your body and hopefully give you some healing with whatever's going on in your body, and give you at the beginning in level 1, as I said, I did this because I wanted to really understand. I understood the geometry, but like, what is pi in relation to phi? And what does Fibonacci sequence have to do with that in relation to the golden mean? And why does this matter and form all of these things that we're talking about? So there's a lot of study, like there's a lot of theory involved in it. I just gave you like a crash course in something that almost makes me feel like I shouldn't do it because it's just too much information in a short period of time. But I also don't really know how to whittle the information down enough to make it very digestible. So actually going through the program together is the best way I know how to do that. Great. So we're going to wrap up soon. I would love to answer some questions. I know some people have hands up. You want to just like randomly? I'll just choose one. There you go. I can't pronounce your name, but go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Meredith. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank
So
you.
my English is not very good, but so I have been studying therapy through I Ching, basically. And I realized I kind of six high dimension geometry. And I start to broke in piece. I just saw very interesting patterns that arise from the frequency 6 to 8 hertz, which is also the frequency that Tesla talking about, like the process of healing of the DNA itself. So if you have any thoughts about this more like frequency approach, so English is not my language. I'm very into geometries. Actually, I have been drawing many models, and which I discovered many patterns very interesting. But yes, if you have any thoughts about this specific frequency, because I just realized when you start to draw this frequency into geometries, it arises it's assembly a kind of dodecahedras, like many dodecahedras, like forming a double helices of DNA. So yes, I'm just very interested. I just changed my career to biomedical engineering now, and I just try to understand the organs and many things to geometries. Also, I saw kind of the heart itself look like a clean bottle, which is a four high dimensional geometry. So if you have any thoughts about this specific frequency, I'd be very grateful. Thank you so much for your teachings, and
Thank
so
you
beautiful.
for your
Thank you.
question. Thanks. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Robert Grant. He's a really good one to follow. Yeah, you know his work. And I mean, there's other people too. I'd really like to, I want to start running some interviews because there's some great people to interview. And I also would like to even maybe host something once a month or once every few months or something where we can just get on and share what it is. Because I get a lot of emails of people saying like, oh, I want to show you this thing and I want to, and it would just be really good to just sort of think tank together and just have time to chat about different ideas like that. The specific aspect of hertz, I mean, I think all of us are getting a really similar memo, and I think all of us are designed to do something that is specific. So whatever it is that you're finding and discovering in the dodecahedral concept and DNA, that's all there. That's true. And so just following the thread that you're following and just learning from all these great people that are in the field. I like really sharing the other people that are in the field. And that's why I'd like to do some more interviews and think tanks that way. There's nothing specific I can say to it, except just keep on going and following the thread of fascination. It'd be really good.
Thank you. Just one more thing. I just saw a Vedic text about. I don't know how to explain, but I can show. Actually, it's in my computer here. Like this Vedic text show kind of 192 cortex layers, which is arise from the spine.
Mm-hmm.
It's very mathematical based on the I Ching itself. Also. I have been following Ching as the pulse, how the pulse transits into the earth and how they change the energy of the body from a human design and genetic point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been trying to understand exactly those cortex layers, how somehow, because I'm really, from the past 3 years, I have been feeling how the organs respond to the change of the planets. I have been testing in many ways. Yeah, I'm just trying to go close more science, how to find some not proof, but like kind of some some insight how it's connected. So do you have any thoughts about those layer cortex and somehow it's connected with the energy of the planets and the movements, moon cycles? It's more about astrology point of view, let's say.
You'll find a fractal iteration to all of it. You'll find like one layer will relate to layers. Yeah, just keep doing what you're doing. Like you're gonna find the synthesis of something, and they'll all be connected. My ideas to your ideas to Robert's ideas to all these different ideas. It's just an exciting time where we're discovering a lot of different things. So there's no one thing I can say to that. Just keep following the thread. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. But just before we we'll just wrap up, but I just want to have you drop back into your body for a moment and just close your eyes and take a breath in and just go back in and take another look inside. And just see if in any way the discussion today has given a spotlight on any area, any added extra understanding. And I'm going to finish by sharing something that I wrote the other day while I was stretching and looking inside, but I just want to give you a moment first. I begin by learning to follow my own body, not telling it what to do, but learning how to stop leading the dance and just follow that part of my body that carries all the wisdom to run everything and orchestrate my breath and body and being is like another person, another entity of consciousness, just as I am called Meredith. And I have spent my life telling it what to do and when to do it. So first, I follow my body. In it, I can feel the toxins wanting releasing from aching joints or tired muscles, the emotions that want acknowledgement, the ache of loss or the thrill of butterfly excitement, or I feel tightness or lightness of joy or the heaviness of sadness. As we connect in the realm where mind meets body through the song lines of emotion, this space I call the neural space activates. This is where both sides of the brain start to communicate more effectively, like both I and the body wisdom are dance partners rather than my left brain dominating the scene with its intractable logic. This is where the body wisdom running everything, the subconscious mind, can inform the conscious me that is now finally listening. When this happens, intuition kicks in at a higher level and creativity starts to flow as the bridge between left and right and sleep and daylight merge. And even as I stretch, moving through the inner sensory awareness of emotions and lightness and heaviness, creative ideas begin to flow and they continue into my daily waking life, increasing every day. The ideas begin to tumble through my days, one on top of the other. There are so many of them, so many good ideas and fun, inspirational projects I want to work on. It's an artist's dream to have such a channel in which to continually swim. And with the inspiration comes the deep desire to complete these projects and be able to share them. What comes next is a powerful gratitude that I have the opportunity in this life to be creative, the opportunity to think and live creatively and offer what I'm designed to do, not just live in survival mode. Gratitude even that I can feel the gratitude and have an awareness of it like a light that can shine through any of my darkest days. A reminder that when I am heavy and uninspired, I need to come back to this place I can feel now, an easy river of flow from my internal world into the spaces I look out into that we call the world. The creative ideas just keep on coming alongside this incredible desire to share their inspiration with others. And I see that the art of any expression, the art is the vehicle upon which inspiration travels to reach others, like a telephone line of written word or paintbrushed canvas or video image, reaching out to share what inspires and uplifts. And then in all that comes a strong sense of responsibility that rises up into a remarkably easy sense of dedication that requires no effort. Dedication to keep myself as healthy as possible for as long as I can, so that I can not only enjoy the learning and building, but a responsibility to keep on offering inspiration to others for as long as I am able, because I can. A path of service lays itself before me, no longer thinking just about what I can earn and what I can get for me. And the purpose of life seems to unfold in front of my inner vision so naturally, the ability to inspire, the desire to offer it, and the will to live. The will to live in order to offer it becomes a simple path and a responsibility to shine. So what does this do for me? It does everything. I want to thank you very much for joining the talk today. I know that it's been 2 full hours. I really appreciate your presence here. If you have any questions, you can write to us at info@fractalanatomy.com. I am going to be starting the classes next Friday if you want to dive in even more deeply and make even more sense of this information and material. Either way, I hope that you got a lot of good information that helps you. I teach class by donation here twice a week, every Wednesday and every Saturday. I teach our somatic stretch work. I keep it really simple online. It's very slow, very easy. If you can get on the floor, you can work with it. You don't have to have flexibility at all in order to come, but it does really help everything open up, and it does help you put this information into your own body and be able to help you. So why don't we finish with one call? I see one hand up. Joanne O'Neill, do you want to unmute and just ask a question?
Oh, I'm so delighted. Thank you so much. This was marvelous. And one of the questions that I have is, I want you to know that I have utilized what I know is called fractal geometry to heal from my stroke 3 years ago. And I'm doing great. I don't know if you can see me. I can't see myself.
No, your video is off, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know how to turn it back on, but it doesn't matter. And I just knew that I could heal my, I knew I could do new neural connections with meditation and talking to my brain. But of course, there would be many, many images that I'm realizing watching your piece here were fractal images. And, you know, Lynn Margulis, Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, all of these things I've been following. I'm 72 and I was 69. I was totally paralyzed on the right side. I am no longer paralyzed.
Wow.
And I don't talk a lot about it because I'm not an expert in quantum healing. But the day after I became paralyzed, I remember thinking, oh, well, there is healing energy everywhere in the universe. So I guess I should start today. And I was kind of in an altered state. And I started meditating 2 to 3 hours a day using a specific kind of golden light, thick like honey. Spirit told me to say it slowly like that. They gifted this particular healing to do with a friend a few years ago, and I've been doing it to myself. And how you're speaking of it is giving, and I've been following Nasim Haramein for many years, is giving me this other language, which I don't have right now, but another way of thinking about, and I don't mean thinking just with thoughts, how this works. And yes, it all weaves. And I've written a few things, and that wasn't much of a question.
Yeah, it was a great comment, though. That was, I mean, that's my greatest hope, that in whatever it is that I'm offering, that it does help just put another layer of imagery in there that helps you do your own healing. Because as I say, if you have a body, you're the best healer that you know. So thank you, Joanne. That's great.
Thank you. And I will be your student.
I look forward to seeing you soon.
So much. Great.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was really, I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. And I really appreciate you in so many ways to spend your attention, that you spent 2 hours with us. So thank you again. Please do reach out, info@fractalanatomy.com, and you can go to geometryofhealing.com and sign up onto my newsletter so that we can keep in touch, and you'll get discounts to different things or services I offer, and also workshops that I do. And maybe I'll even see you next Friday at our first call. Much love. Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. It was
Thank
wonderful.
you, Meredith.
Bye.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello.
So inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Lining up.
Wow, beautiful
Oh,
people.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Ah, merci.
Merci.
Merci mille fois.
Thank you.